Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. And today I want to get back to a year-long series that I'm doing on the films of 1973, 50 years ago. What were films like then? And I actually was around to watch films in 1973 as a young adult. How do I look at them now? How do the films themselves look today? I've sloughed off on this year's 50-year look back, because last year I did over 50 films, 50 videos on the films of 1972. I'm not even going to come to half of that this year, but I do want to hit at least all the significant films. And the film today that I want to talk about is truly one of the significant films of 1973, and this is AMARCORD by Federico Fellini. And this is a film that won Fellini his fourth Academy Award for Best Foreign Film, is what it was called in those days. And that's what I just showed you, is a page from the booklet from the Essential Fellini Criterion set that came out in November 3 years ago. What's that? 2020. So I bought this it came out during the sale, during the Barnes & Noble half price sale. And we do have a flash sale coming up from Criterion, hopefully sometime in October this month, a one-day 24-hour sale. And then hopefully next month we'll have another Barnes & Noble half price sale. So this was a fairly controversial as far as the packaging goes. I've shown this, I think, one or two times, but not for a long time. It's sort of in a laser disc or LP type packaging on the inside, in which you get 15 discs, all in these slide-in slots, which I don't care for, but these aren't real tight ones. So there's AMARCORD. I still have two more movies to go. I still have And the Ship Sails On and Intervista, and then they also included a documentary on Marcello Mastroianni. So again, a significant film for Fellini, and it was a real audience pleaser. I remember going to see this film in '73, and the audiences loved the film, which was a good thing for Fellini. It's very important because he had sort of, as far as his commercial prospects, it's sort of going off the rail with films like Satyricon and Roma, which were films without any. They were not audience-friendly films. Let's put it that way. Very imaginative, very much Fellini exploring all the fantasies of his imagination. And he certainly had a very vivid imagination. But here he returns to his hometown of Rimini. Now, he did not film in Rimini. This is a film. It might be constructed to look like Rimini, but it was constructed on Cinesetta's sound stages. There are a couple outdoor scenes, but not in Rimini. So, and this is sort of a prequel to I Vitelloni, which I think was Fellini's third film, his first real big success, which was autobiographical, also about Rimini, not filmed in Rimini, about 20-something wastrels, and they're layabouts, and they don't really do much of anything. And Fellini's in that particular film, at least somewhat, in one of these young men in their 20s. He escapes Rimini and he goes to Rome. He's not going to become a lifelong wastrel like his friends. So this is sort of like a prequel, because we're back in before Fellini left Rimini, I think in 1939, and so this might be considered the early 30s in Rimini. So these are young teenage boys, and this is a very anecdotal movie. It does center to a significant degree on one particular family, the family of Tita, who is in real life was Fellini's best friend. And we see him in a documentary from, I guess, the early 2000s talking about Fellini and the anecdotes in this film, how many of them came from real life, and you get a very interesting depiction or a description of Fellini from Tita, because they were lifelong friends. Fellini never wanted to, he had a very strange relationship with this hometown that he's depicting here in AMARCORD, but he remained lifelong friends with Tita. But there's no Fellini here. He's not present in this. He's sort of looking back from the outside. The movie will cover 1 year. So we go from spring, the onset of spring, the puffballs, another one of the beautiful images in the film, floating through the sky, and everybody is like, spring is here, spring is here. And then it will end in the same way. It ends with a wedding, and then we again see the puffballs. 4 seasons. And Fellini very much brings fascism into play in this film. Fellini was not a fascist. Tita, the real-life Tita, was a fascist. Everybody was basically a fascist. They were not the fascism by this time in this period. They were ruling by consensus, and people loved the show of fascism. But as Tita, the real-life Tita, says, Fellini was never part of that. He had nothing. He had indifference, if not contempt, for fascism, and he certainly shows it here in the way it is depicted here is seen as, you know, a bunch of buffoons in black uniforms. But there's very much, this is a film of artifice. Fellini reconstructs on stage and cardboard the Mussolini's great ocean liner called Rex. It's supposedly, this is a totally made up anecdote. The townspeople go out on their boats because they know it's sailing by, and we see it, and it doesn't look real at all, and Fellini didn't want it to look real. He's constructing a reality here, not just that sequence, but a reality here that really isn't reality. It's a version of reality. A dream world of memories. The screenwriter that worked with Fellini on so many of his films, Tonio Guerra, he grew up in town just a few miles away from Rimini on the coast. So it's said that there are Fellini memories here, but there's also some Tonio Guerra memories as well. And he is a very famous screenwriter. He worked with so many of the greatest European film directors in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. And you also have to expect the exaggeration. This is an artificial world, a world of exaggeration, of caricature, especially with the female form. It's always bothered me, and it bothers lots of people. It bothered me back in 1973. It's not a case of wokeness, but Fellini seemed to be somewhat misogynist in his approach to women. Certainly, he wasn't unusual probably in men, especially male directors of his era, and not just Italian men. But nevertheless, you know, he's always focusing on women, hefty women in tight clothing, always focusing in on the derriere. We even have a snowball fight in this film where, you know, we watch one of the actresses' derriere as he's joined in the snowball fight. She bends over and we get a bunch of snowball hitting her derriere. And, you know, there's also exaggerated, I guess she's supposed to be a nymphomaniac who roams the beach, and very much exaggerated. And the real life Tita says, you know, all this stuff. There was an action, I forget her name, Volpina, I think was the name of the young woman who is sort of mentally ill and you know, in exaggerated sexuality, and there was such a person, but she wasn't anything like that. And the incidents involving her did actually take place. And this is all seen through Tita's eyes as a young boy. and his confusion about sexuality and his fear of women. And sometimes this female form that's so exaggerated is kind of expressing Fellini's own fear of females, especially that he felt, as Tito says in the interviews, that Fellini had a fear of women when he was growing up. So there's no stars here, but we do get a recognizable actress playing the part of Gracinda, and this is Magli Noel, and she is the derriere. She has the derriere that is so worshipped by the young boys in the town, but by everybody as she parades. And there was really, and Tita says there was a real life woman that was like that, but again, from their town. But again, Fellini exaggerates her. And he generally, and there's a very distasteful scene, at least I found it distasteful, where Tita goes to this very hefty women. Fellini was very much attracted to, at least on film, to very robust women, and she sort of gives him a little bit of a sexual favor that some might find distasteful in his depiction of women. So it's a very visually sumptuous film. I think if one thing, no matter how you might feel about Fellini's attitude towards women, and really his kind of sentimentality, because this is a very sentimental movie, it's visually, this is a sumptuous movie. I remember seeing it in the theater, and everybody, this was a popular movie in 1973, and everybody was, oohing and ahhing. There's a great shot of a peacock in a snowstorm, and it's funny. There's some Fellini's. I sometimes think Fellini's greatest gift was for comedy, and sometimes he kind of suppresses that comedy in his films. But there is a scene here of a family dinner that's just uproariously funny. I mean, it's one of the funniest sequences in all of Fellini's films. And we get the music by Rota. It's very derivative of all the music that he wrote for all the Fellini films, but Rota was a much beloved composer and so much associated with Fellini's kind of melancholy. The Giuseppe Rotano does the camera work here, and like I say, a visually sumptuous film. There's a really great documentary, I've mentioned it, where we get many of the collaborators on the film. I think this is from 2006, perhaps a little bit before, for the DVD, the original Criterion DVD. Now this AMARCORD is also available as a standalone, and it has been upgraded from DVD to Blu-ray, but this was the era where Criterion was really giving you lots of great extras. And this documentary I just found absolutely great, especially the character, or the real life person that the character in the movie, Tita, was based on. Everybody has great reminiscences of Fellini here, and in the making of the film, there's a great commentary with Frank Burke, Peter Brunette. They're film historians. One of them has written 2 books on Fellini, and they confront Fellini's his up and down kind of career and his subsequent reputation, because Fellini has suffered a bit in reputation as the years have gone by. I, for one, in 1973, by the time AMARCORD came out, I had Fellini fatigue. I was only, 24 years old, but I had seen all of Fellini's films by this point, because he was an art house staple. So, and I lived close to New York City, so I was able to see just about all his films. Not quite all, but I didn't care for Juliet of the Spirits. I didn't care for Satyricon and Roma. I got to admit, I'm not the biggest fan of Fellini. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to, what I think about Fellini or any filmmaker is he great or isn't he great? It's neither here nor there what I think about. What my conclusion is, I'm much more interested, and it's a lot more fun to me to just try to describe what's interesting about a film and a filmmaker and a film. There's certainly a lot of interest to be found in Fellini, but I also, strangely enough, I started very enthusiastically because I always felt guilty whenever there's a great film director and I don't particularly engage with him very well. I always think there's got to be something wrong with me. Obviously everybody thinks this guy's a genius, a maestro. And so I went through in chronological order. By the time I got to Juliet of the Spirits, Fellini fatigue had set in just as it had in the early 1970s, and I didn't go on to Satyricon and Roma until last year, because Roma was a 1972 film, and I still am not. I can't. Fellini has great surfaces. There's they're beautiful to look at. They're often funny. I can never identify what's below the surface to make me want to go back and watch these films again. The kind of film that I call a favorite is the kind of film that I want to see again and again. And I don't get enough out of it the first time or the second time. I need to get more. I don't feel that with Fellini. And also with Fellini, he so dominated Italian cinema and as regards to how people saw what people were able to see of Italian cinema, not just Fellini, Antonioni as well, but Antonioni became more of a international filmmaker in the late 1960s with Blow Up and some of his subsequent films. But in recent years, I've discovered a lot more Italian film directors that were neglected because Fellini was it as far as Italian cinema goes, and I found so many more that I do engage with much more. And so my next one is going to be another 1973 film, and this is from another Italian filmmaker who was largely ignored in the U.S. during the prime of his career. And this property is no longer a threat, the filmmaker Elio Petri. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.